Welcome back to another episode of the Wilderness Fitness Podcast. Dr. Rob here, giving you a quick intro on this episode. Normally, the guest episodes are not going to be coming out until the middle of August, start of September, somewhere around there when hunting season starts. Due to the nature of the current political climate and the proposal of the Big Beautiful Bill with the Public Land Initiative in the sell-off, I wanted to get someone on the podcast who is more versed in the scenario or the situation than I am. So I am happily joined by Will Marquardt. He is the owner of Davis Tent, and uh, he had a pivotal role in the ballot initiative with Prop 127, the mountain lion ban. So I had Will on. We talked for about 40 minutes. Anyway, tune into the episode, and I hope you guys enjoy. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Wilderness Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Rob Minturn. Today, I'm joined by Will Marquardt, owner of Davis Tent. Will has taken time out of his Sunday here to chat with me about the proposition and the bill that's going through, the big beautiful bill, right? Is that what it's called?
Big beautiful bill, baby.
So this was a last minute kind of texted him yesterday, and he's like, "Yeah, I can do it on Sunday." So here we are today doing that. Will is a member. He's a school board member. He's a church board member. He was a special consultant for CRWM and won an award from the Colorado Trappers Association for his efforts in defeating Proposition 127. So is well versed in terms of getting things done and getting things pushed through, and the benefit for the majority of folks, especially for the hunting population with Prop 127. So Will, like I said, has taken time out of his Sunday to talk about this big, beautiful bill and the proposition to sell off the public lands. Thank you, Will.
Yeah, great to be here, Rob. Thank you.
Um, is there anything that I missed in introducing you?
Huh. No, not necessarily. I always think of myself. I think people probably because of what I do and maybe what they talk to me about, they think of me as a hunter. I guess I think of myself more as an outdoors person, pretty well rounded, whether it's canoeing or hiking or, uh, you know, backpacking, just spending time outdoors, out west, in Northwest Ontario, wherever I am, I'm probably hiking or running there. So it's pretty neat for me. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm mostly a bow hunter. And hey, man, if I'm just going for a walk outdoors with my bow, I'm pretty good with that.
It's not so bad. You grew up in Wisconsin, though, and I think that gives you a special viewpoint on this because you grew up in a state that doesn't have access to public land. I mean, there is public land back there, like the Nicolet National Forest and all that in northern
Sure.
Wisconsin. But and then you moved out to Colorado. I think it was in your 20s or 30s.
Early 30s. Yep.
30s. So you have backgrounds in both in a state that is fairly privatized and in a state that's got quite a bit of public land. So
As you know, you could kind of cut Wisconsin in half. There's very little of that public land in the southern half of the state, and there's quite a bit of it in the northern part of the state. But it isn't anything like being out west and access to the amazing, diverse mountainous desert landscapes that we have out here.
my first experience with that was in Washington State in 2016 on a contract in the Seattle area, and going to Mount Rainier National Park, Mount Rainier National Forest. It was incredible. Mount Baker National Forest. It was incredible. So definitely have found myself on public land very often here the last 9 years of my life.
Amazing.
So let's just dive on into it. Let's talk about the bill, the big beautiful bill, more specifically the public land sell-off. In that, what states are involved and what kind of acreage are we talking about?
Yeah. So first of all, I think just to frame this without getting too far into it, we're talking about an omnibus budget reconciliation bill. So it's this great big bill, including spending and revenue and debt limit. And so inside of a big bill like this, then there's all these opportunities to stick in other stuff. And there becomes an enormous amount of pressure on senators or House representatives to go along with the party and go along with what they think is the best thing for the country, even though there's things in it that might be absolutely abhorrent. And so I think that's kind of where we find ourselves now. You've got a lot of pressure. Obviously, Trump has a tremendous amount of influence inside of the Republican Party at this point. And so a lot of these people are put into really difficult situations when you have something like this proposed public land sale. It impacts most Western states that you can think of. So think of Colorado, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, New Mexico, Nevada, Arizona, California, and probably Washington and Oregon. I think that's the group. Now, notably, you probably noticed that I left out Montana, which it's really impossible right now to, find actual facts on why Montana was left out. But you have to remember in the House version of this bill, this was stripped up. A smaller version of this was stripped out at the last second. And Ryan Zinke, I think, Representative Zinke in the House was from Montana, and he is the one that refused. I mean, they needed every vote they could get. And he was the one, and he's from Montana, that got that stripped out. Well, also interestingly, on the Senate side, where this is coming from now, from Mike Lee of Utah, in a bigger way, uh, what's his name? Senator Ron Daines is on.
Steve Daines.
What, what's that?
Steve Daines.
Steve Daines, thank you, is on the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, I think it is. And so that's where Mike Lee is the head of that committee and where that came from. So there's sort of this dual connection to Montana. And although it's not being stated anywhere publicly, there's no information to prove it. It appears that it's likely because of these two people's influence that they got Montana excluded, which I both understand and I find absolutely disgusting at the same time because, here they have protected their one little piece of the world or the US and left the rest of the West to swing in the wind, which is really disturbing to me.
No.
But ultimately, we're talking about the sale of, depending on who you're listening to, somewhere between 2 and 3 or 2 and 3.3 million acres of land. The scary thing, when you start to kind of drill down into this and understand it, is that the language is, you hear a lot of talk about, oh, it's for affordable housing. Oh, we're selling property only close to population centers. Well, guess what? There's nothing in this bill that specifically stipulates it's for affordable housing. They're just saying that. It could be for McMansions or mansions themselves. There's nothing that stipulates that. Also, there's no definition of what a population center is. So, what does it mean that it's a population center? Well, I don't know. I guess somebody will decide that as we go along, right? I mean, somebody will decide on our national treasure based on their squishy definitions of any of this stuff. And then, but because after it's passed, all bets are off. Any protection that you thought you might have had based on language, that's over because the language isn't specific enough to keep it. I'm not in agreement with it if the language was specific. Let me be clear. But the language is so broad that that land could be used for anything.
Why is it such a big deal that the federal government does not? Because I brought this up to a patient on Friday, and it was my understanding at the time that the federal lands were going to be sold off to the state, and he was all for it. And so, why is it such a big deal that the federal lands stay in the federal government? Like, are there specific protections that Mr. Roosevelt put into place to protect those lands?
Sure. Great question. I mean, first of all, it's not necessarily going to, again, all of this language is really squishy. What I think it says is that the state has a first right of refusal on the property. And so I'll give you for instance, here in Colorado, I don't have any state land right across the street from me, although I am looking over sections and sections of beautiful farmland out my window. But even if I did, in Colorado, there's a really good chance I wouldn't, it's not even legal for me to step foot on it because we have hundreds of thousands of acres of Colorado state land that is illegal to put your feet on.
What?
You're, that's just the state. That's how the state law is set up. That they can make the rules, and they've made it so we can't. Like for instance, if I had 40, and this happens in Colorado, if there were 40 acres or 160 or a whole section, it doesn't matter, right across from me, and behind that, and that could give me access to 20,000 acres of public land. Well, the state says I can't touch that. It's not legal for me to go on that state land, so I couldn't get access to the 40,000 or 20,000 acres of federal land. And so this whole idea that it might go to the states first, it might not go to the states first, it's really just another squishy canard in this whole thing that doesn't hold anybody's feet to the fire on this. And so also, it is you think about what happens nowadays when development wants to happen in a sensitive area. What happens? Oh, there's oftentimes years of studies and lawsuits about whether there can be development there, how it will impact wildlife in the area, if there are any endangered species. Well, guess what? There's no there's no cutout at all for any kind of concern about wildlife in this. So if this piece of property, which let's just say it's within 5 miles of downtown Missoula, Montana, or whatever, it doesn't or in the Gallatin Valley, for instance, in Montana. I'm using Montana, even though Montana is not included. But the point is that, or Denver, Colorado, doesn't matter. The point is that that could be absolutely critical migration habitat for elk, or it could be absolutely critical winter habitat for antelope. Or you go ahead and pick your species here, and there's nothing that would stop them from selling that land that could literally, it could cause the collapse of a herd if you sold off this piece of property in the middle of a winter range that then they wouldn't use anything close to it because of they don't want to be in that close of proximity to humans. So, you look at like how antelope act, if you've got 1,000 acres and you put a building in the middle of it, I see it all the time. Antelope won't even go near it. I mean, they are highly impacted by this kind of thing. And so I just find it repulsive that we could even consider selling off land that could be critical habitat or winter range or whatever it might be for our animals. And it's just like, yeah, it's no big deal. We're doing it for affordable housing. There's plenty of ways to do that that have nothing to do with this bill.
Got it.
Yeah. It's really disconcerting. I mean, for instance, the federal government can already do trades on land. If they have a piece of property that's not suitable for, wildlife or grazing or whatever, and there's another piece of property that is suitable, they could trade it with a developer. They have the ability to do that. This is not like it adds something, that they can't do now. This is a mandate to sell federal lands in the next 5 years, an absolute mandate.
So what happens if the bill passes and this stuff does not get off of the bill? Like, what kind of timeline are we looking at for things to start changing?
Probably in the next year or two. It'll be fast. I mean, it's literally, I don't know, and they haven't, because the bill doesn't say it, how they would identify properties. But, think if you did live in, I'm just trying to, anywhere in the West that was whatever is defined as a population center, and there was an area that was federal land that was great for hiking or mountain biking within close proximity there, 1 to 5 miles or whatever. Boom, they could just sell that off. And that ability to access that land, which keep in mind, this is about the most federal properties are about the most egalitarian thing. And anybody can use them. You don't have to have a job. You don't have to have money. You could have a regular blue collar job, you could be anybody. You could be retired. Anyone could use them. And so it's a beautiful part, really that's part of the fabric of the country. And suddenly we're talking about just disposing of that property. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, and by the way, if they were to maximally sell this property, the estimates on the impact on the budget are $5 billion to $10 billion. We're talking about trillions of dollars here. This is a non. This is just a little tiny, crumb that you're brushing off your arm or something. It's going to have no impact on reducing the debt in any meaningful way. All it's going to do is make sure that my kids, me, my kids, my grandkids, the future generations never have access to this property again.
Can you go back and explain what like summer ranges and winter ranges are for folks who have driven through, I'll say Wyoming, for example. I'm sure they drive through Wyoming and they're like, what the hell is this? Like, there's nothing here. I don't see any animals. It's going to greatly depend on the time of year that they drive through, right? So, like, so if they drive through that and they're like, yeah, there's nothing here, go ahead and sell it off. Well, it might be the time of year that they drive through. Like, explain the summer and the winter ranges for folks.
100%. Let's start with migration corridors, right? Because like in any kind of an area, elk will come out of the high country in the winter because they can, for instance, we'll just use elk as an example, and mule deer. They'll come out of the high country in the winter in order because they don't have access to food anymore. They can't reach it anymore. And so they'll come to lower country, lower property. And as they're getting to that lower land and they're coming out of this higher land, there's these migration corridors that connect them. And so these corridors are critically important. And so that when they're coming out of the mountains through that migration corridor, where they're going to is winter range, where they have access, safe access to food. And so these corridors are important, and these winter ranges are critically important. I mean, so when you start talking about ranges and what's important, migration corridors are, I don't know, maybe number one, but that winter range is, number two. And so really that's what we're talking about here, because we're talking about, in the West, migratory populations of big game animals. They have to move and they need a place to be able to be safe and to be able to get sustenance during the winter time. And so that's why those two items are so critical in this discussion. And this is nothing new. I mean, we do all kinds of things now, and there's all kinds of lawsuits around developments because they impact migration corridors or because they impact winter range of animals. And so it's just so critical that we don't do something that doesn't even take those things into consideration. I mean, it's it's unbelievable that that could even happen in today's day and age when you think about the kind of lawsuits that are around anything that's an animal, as far as development goes. So to not have that as part of an absolute, I mean, that's a red line as far as how we handle our natural resources, be it public or private. And, I mean, another thing is the checkerboard pattern of the West. If anybody's ever seen a map of this, you got federal land here, and then you got private land, and then you got federal land, private land, and federal land, and private land. And so one little chunk of federal land sold off outside of these whole issues of migration patterns can cut off 20,000 acres. All you have to do is look across the West at real estate listings for larger properties. Let's say somebody's selling something that's 10,000 acres. You will see right in the real estate listing, it will say 10,000 deeded acres, 40,000 acres of property. That's because the deeded acres cut off the public from using the federal lands in those properties. And so now we're talking about a situation where we're going to cut off more public land. There's already tons of public land cut off from us and from our access. These kind of things could create a situation where we sell off 3 million acres, but we've cut off access to 6 million acres. And we don't know where that could go. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic about it, but we don't really know what the impacts of some of these land sellouts could be. Or if we're talking, I mean, it'd be nice to think about this as 10-acre parcels, but That's really not what we're looking at here. You don't get to 3 million selling off 10-acre parcels. I mean, you're selling off hundreds of acres, maybe thousands of acres inside of, these kind of programs. It's the only way you can get to millions. So,
Right.
yeah, it's really disconcerting. It's disconcerting because the language is things like priorities or housing and associated structures or affiliated or associated structures or something along those lines. And so, when things are squishy like that, nothing good can come of this. Nothing good.
So when folks look at the map, they go to like I'm on Meat Eater's website right now. They have a map up, and I'm looking at the bighorns. They're gonna see like yellow and green. What like or yellow? Sorry, not yellow and green. Yeah, yellow and green or orange and green. What is the difference between BLM land and National Forest land typically?
Well, I think that the main thing that you should think about, or I mean, if you're just trying to, the broad strokes is that you've got two different federal agencies that manage land. And so the broad stroke is one of those is BLM, the Bureau of Land Management. And so that color is going to appear in one of the, in the map, and one, or that land is going to appear in one color, and the Forest Service land is going to appear in the other. And so both of those lands are identified as properties that any of that land, which is something like 250 million acres, in the Western US. It's a lot. I mean, in some of these Western states, it's 50%, 40%, 80%. I don't know what Nevada is, but it might exceed that.
So I just the Meat Eater has the numbers up right now.
Yeah.
Total acreage available for sale, Alaska. Alaska is a state that no one's really talking about, but there's a ton of land available for sale in Alaska if this goes through. Almost 83 million acres. Arizona, 14.5 million acres. California, 16 point almost 7 million acres. Colorado, 14.3. Idaho, 21.7-ish. Nevada's 33 and a half. New Mexico's 14.3 million. Oregon's 21 point almost 8. Utah's 18.7. Washington's 5.3. Wyoming is almost 15 million acres.
Yeah, when you think about the other thing that is just really disturbing, I mean, this is the old, I guess there's other ways to say this, but, the nose of the camel under the tent thing, the old take an inch, the minute that you say, oh, yeah, this is how we do it, all of a sudden this could happen every budget reconciliation. We could sell off another 0.5% or 0.75%. In 10 years, in 10 budget reconciliations, we've lost 10% of our federal lands and maybe access to 25% of our federal lands. This is just, one of the amazing things about the Western United States is this heritage of public lands that we have. And to just even consider that somehow there's real benefit to this, I don't think so. I just don't. I don't see any redeeming quality of this. I mean, when you're talking about $5 billion in a budget that's whatever it is, 6 trillion or 5 trillion or whatever the heck it is, that just doesn't even. It's like a drop in the ocean. So
There are other
it,
ways to get money.
yeah, it is. And I mean, I look. One other way to look at it is, and I try to stay. I very specifically try to stay out of like the tribal politics of any of this. So like if you're somebody that votes, let's just say you vote Republican because that's where this is coming from. What if this was coming from the Democrats? How would that make you feel? It's a lot easier to sort of excuse your own tribe for some kind of behavior that's bad and then get on the other side. It's like, it's really easy to say this party spends too much money, but I can prove that both parties spend too much money. It's obviously provable. In fact, all you have to do is look at the stats of how money is spent. And one side tends to do great big programs all at once, and the other side tends to spend it a little differently, but neither party has materially spent less money than the other one over the last 30 or 40 years. And so, you know, don't think that this is something that's going to just stop with this bill, this reconciliation, this party affiliation. I mean, the minute I see online, because I've seen a lot of this where people are saying, oh, you're Republicans, you're the ones that voted for Trump. Well, that's of course true. But here's somebody that is purporting to be against the public land sale. But instead of putting their efforts towards supporting this group effort that supports everyone in the United States, they feel it necessary to take shots at the other tribe. There, that doesn't help anything.
Right.
You know?
You're drawing swords, you're not locking shields.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think of like, I don't know how many people are familiar with the big fight we had, Proposition 127 in Colorado. I gave out thousands of yard signs for that. And I would tell people, and in the hunting community, a large percent of those people would be conservative voters. Not all of them, but a pretty large percentage. I would always say to people, do not put this next to a Trump sign. And my only point is that there's no reason to inflame people about some tribal affiliation that might otherwise agree with you. I mean, let's just keep that out of this and do what's best for the country, because there's a ton of Democrats that are 100% against this. So they're on our team. There's a ton of Republicans. And if you're a Democrat, then there's a ton of Republicans, obviously not in the Senate or the House right now, but people that are against this. They're on our team. And so, let's be on the team for the outdoors. Let's be on the team for our federal lands. Let's be on the team that enjoys being out and being able to hike in the mountains or hike in the desert or maybe go hunting or whatever that is, because that's the team that matters and that's the team that can win on this issue. Because if enough people, and a lot of people are calling their senators and calling their representatives, and I would ask everyone to make one phone call or 20 phone calls, because you know when you're building a wall, a retaining wall, which I'm doing right now, in fact I'm building 3 of them. uh, One brick doesn't hold back the earth, but 200 does. And every one of those 200 bricks matters. If you took one of those out of that thing, you'd have dirt flowing over it or through it and wrecking the whole thing. And so, who cares where those bricks came from or how those bricks feel about anything? How those people in this issue feel about anything? It doesn't matter. What we need to do is band together and save our public lands. You can fight about your dumb political crap later. There's plenty of time for that. Your entire life you can spend doing that if it's important to you. That's me getting on my pedestal and my you know,
Your soapbox.
yeah, my soapbox. Right.
That's fine. You can stand on soapboxes in this podcast. That's what we're about.
Well, thank you.
Um, how can non-residents, like folks listening to this in Wisconsin, Larry listening to this in Wisconsin, Sabrina listening to this in Pennsylvania, um, Rod listening to this in Michigan, like how can these folks get involved
Great,
with
yeah, great question. So, one really, an organization that's doing a terrific job is Howl for Wildlife, and or howl.org. Uh, Maybe you could look that up, Rob, and tell me the URL for them.
I'll
They're,
link it in the show notes, everybody, so they don't have to look it up.
what's that?
I'll link it in the show notes so they can just go to the show notes and click on the link.
Wonderful. So what Howl is doing is they're making uh, information accessible to people so they know who to call, how to call, where to call to make the biggest impact. And so, even if you're living in Michigan, well, first of all, you could call your own senators, but this particular issue, because it's coming from the Republicans, those are the ones that matter to phone call. Whether they're in the House or the Senate is mostly important right now. There's nothing that stops you living in Michigan and calling a senator in Wyoming. There's nothing that stops you from calling anybody anywhere. Now, maybe they're maybe it's a bigger deal if it's one of their own constituents. But the bottom line is, what's a big deal is volume. These people pay attention to volume because they don't get a lot of phone calls. They don't get huge volume on a lot of issues. And, of this bill, this is just this little teeny piece of it. So we need to make it into this great big thing that appears even bigger than it is. So they think, holy cow, this could impact my ability to get reelected. This could impact my ability, to operate on other issues. And so, uh, yeah, HOWL is a really good one. There's some other really great follows. Go Hunt and Lorenzo with Go Hunt is doing some really good stuff on this. But yeah, I would think the simplest thing is HOWL's got this stuff down, and they're working nationwide. They're a small organization, but they're doing a terrific job working nationwide on outdoor issues.
What other organizations are, I saw Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation has put out yeah,
Yeah,
what other Mule Deer Foundation, anybody else?
I haven't really heard what the Mule Deer Foundation is doing, but I can tell you that Teddy Roosevelt Conservation Project, TRCP, uh, that's a remarkable organization, a great follow on Instagram or wherever you do your Facebook, wherever you do your social media stuff. They are a nonpartisan group that stands up for wildlife and wildlife issues. Traditionally, the TRCP, because they do so much work that is bipartisan kind of stuff, they have been less interested in getting involved in things that have a kind of a political aspect to them. But I can tell you, I met with Joe Peterson, the CEO of TRCP, a couple of months ago. I also met with other people that are on the ground here in Colorado, and they expressed more interest in speaking out on these issues, regardless of where that might fall on the political spectrum. Because, you know, you can say that all you want, but if it comes right down to it, if you're not going to stand up for public lands, who are you? As far as an organization like Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Project. I mean, they're a remarkable organization. They're doing things in the right direction. They've always been a really good organization, but they're getting involved in ways that they haven't before. And I'm proud of them for doing that and really happy because they're really influential. I mean, they some people have been frustrated with them in the past, and I have occasionally been frustrated with them. And sometimes I was over Proposition 127, and so I'm sometimes I'm even because I do make phone calls, and I mean I write the board, and I know the board members of Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. I know these people at TRCP. They know how I feel about stuff, whether they want to know it or not. Sometimes I'm even surprised that they still talk to me, but sometimes it matters. Sometimes you actually get results from being the squeaky wheel. And these things are, when I said when we started this podcast, I'm more of an outdoor, I consider myself more of an outdoorsman than I am a hunter. These things really matter to me. They matter to me for you who are much younger than I am. They matter to me for my kids, my grandkids, and things that I can't even think of that are generations from now because we ain't getting it back. There's not going to be a day when you hear about, oh, we're going to buy 3% more public land. It's gone forever when it's gone. And I think I can't abide by that. I cannot abide by that. And it is I know that, our lives are really busy and it really is hard to do one more thing a lot of times and get involved in one more thing. Look, some things are worth just a little bit of time. So, take 20 minutes out of one of your workouts with Rob. Just kidding. No, just find yourself a few minutes and try to make an impact. Make a phone call, send an email, do something because this and some other issues when it comes to, our national treasure are really worthwhile.
Yeah. And
And,
makes it howlforwildlife.org /keep it public is the website. I'll link that in the show notes for everybody so you don't have to go searching for it. But that's what it is, howlforwildlife.org /keep it public. They make it incredibly easy. Like I did it on my way to Canada. When this was in the house, I did it on my way to Canada. I had just enough service to record a video. I had stopped for the for lunch or something like that. I recorded the video in the truck. I put in my information. It's like name, address, zip code, pops out your senators. You do a 60-second or less video. They don't want it to be long. And I submitted it. Once it said submitted, I continued driving, like 5 minutes out of your day for the video. And then the link for the senators, for the Republican senators, I'll put that in the show notes too. So that way, no matter what state you're in, you can just click on the link. It's an Excel sheet with the list of senators from all these different states. Call yours, obviously, and then call the next senator in the state that you've recreated in, snowmobiled, hiked, backpacked, kayaked, any of that stuff. Call a state that you've been in personally, so that way, and tell them your story. Keep it short, but tell them your story so that way they have a person behind the voice.
Yeah, and Rob, as you mentioned, I've been really involved with CRWM, who and we focus much more specifically on Colorado issues. Not that we don't do some things outside of there, and there might be some interesting things there. That podcast is called Through the Gates. The executive director of CRWM is Dan Gates, who a lot of people in the hunting space know because of all the notoriety that he received from the Prop 127 fight. But I'll give you one other follow or podcast to take a look at, and that's Randy Newberg has a number of podcasts, but one of them is called Hunt Talk Radio, which sounds like all you'd ever hear about is hunting. But Randy is an extremely active person in the political side of what happens in the hunting space and with public land. He's a very interesting guy that really deep dives into like the seven principles of the North American wildlife model, for instance. And he's in a kind of an amazing, just, keep him in your podcast list because when something comes up, you might look at his episodes and see who's on. Because he really goes out of his way to educate people in an in-depth manner about issues. And so, yeah, Randy Newberg, again, it's a good follow on social media as well. But Hunt Talk Radio is the specific podcast that might be interesting to people.
Are there specific episodes with Through the Gates and the Randy Newberg Hunt Talk Radio? Have they done specific episodes talking about this?
I checked. I mean, Randy, I know is in Washington right now fighting this issue, uh, and so he had not. Last I looked, done a podcast on it, and I'm talking to you on my phone, so it's hard to pick up my phone and search my podcast list to see whether Through the Gates has covered it or not.
I'll take a look. If there is, I'll link it in the show notes too.
Also, why don't you take a look at Go Hunt? Take a look to see what Lorenzo with Go Hunt has done because he's spoken out very forcefully on this issue, and it wouldn't surprise me if they've done something on this. I'm trying to think who else. Uh, you know, I'm just not even gonna because I'm just sort of shooting from the hip. But Go Hunt would be a good one to check on. Through the Gates, you could check on, and I would keep in touch with what Randy is doing and if he has coming out with a podcast on it.
Sounds good, man. I appreciate
Yeah.
it. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on? Anything else that I missed as far as asking questions?
No, I just want to say, I moved to Colorado in 1998, uh, and it's just been just such a formative thing in my life, being able to have access to this tremendous public space that we have. We're so fortunate. I mean, I don't think people understand how amazing this is. I mean, this isn't normal. You don't get to do this. You don't get to go to Spain and have this, or Germany, or anywhere in the world that I'm familiar with. We have something special here, and we don't want to go down a road that starts to eat into that or gives people less access to it that can't afford to pay to do it because this is every man's property. And let's do whatever we can to protect it. It's worth it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. I appreciate your time, Will.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. Take care.
Hey, thanks for tuning in for another episode. Again, this is a one-off, a spin-off here of the normal format this summer. But if you found this episode helpful, share it with someone. First, take action. Call the senator. Check out the show notes. Call your senator. Call a senator in the state that you've recreated in. Send in your videos with Howl. It's a quick 60 seconds. It's super simple. And then share this podcast with a friend or family member who is recreated out west who doesn't know about the bill yet. Call your senators on your way to work, on your way home from work, leave voicemails, bog up the phones, be annoying. That's what we got to do to get this done. But I hope you guys have a great day. Have an awesome Monday, and we'll catch you in that next episode later this week.